Hey guys, Gaming Chief here and welcome back to another video. This video we're going to be making a global PvE tier list. This is strictly PvE and this will be strictly for characters that are only announced for global. So any CN characters we will not be covering them, but I will cover my general thoughts on how good these characters are in the future. Without further ado, let's get started. So if you have watched my previous videos, you would already have a bit of an understanding on where each character stands in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. So now we're going to be putting them in a whole comprehensive list. So starting with Bai Ling. Now Bai Ling is a physical bow, and quickly for PvE only, since she is an SR, I would rank her in C, purely because her damage is pretty mediocre and she requires copies to really fit into that supporting. Now, I wouldn't put her in D because there are a couple of characters that I do feel are a bit weaker than her for PvE. Moving on, we have Claudia. Claudia is going to be our limited banner physical sword character. She, for PvE purposes, I would most definitely rank her up in S, possibly S+ tier. But in the future of the game, we'll have a character that really surpasses Claudia in her supporting DPS role. So I'm going to put her actually down over in S. Next up, Cobalt. Probably one of the best DPS characters. She is actually quite meta in CN right now with her fire damage and can easily shred bosses on her own. A couple of videos out there if you want to check them out. But I'm definitely going to be ranking her S+. She does need copies though. Do note she does need copies. So if you really want to build Claudia, make sure that you're saved up and have enough to pull for, I would say, 6-star Claudia. That's when she really gets a huge power spike. Now next up on the list, Coco Ritter. For PvE purposes, Coco Ritter, we're talking group play, she's really good. She's a healer, and you're definitely going to be needing healers throughout the majority of the game. When we look at healers, no healer, no DPS, right? If your DPS is dead, they're not a good DPS. You definitely want a healer with you. Now Crow. I've seen a lot of people talk about Crow. I have conflicting thoughts of Crow. Now the thing with Crow is he has a very high skill floor. So if you do not take the time to actually learn how to use Crow, he's not going to be very good. The other issue with Crow is that he also requires multiple copies to really pull out all his damage. And you also make use of his backstab mechanic. But the thing is, with Nemesis being announced for global, she and Crow make a great pair. So for Crow, for the purpose of launch, I'm going to be putting him in S, but do note he does require some investment. And if you're going to have him up in S, I would say that you definitely want Nemesis paired up with him. And next up on the list, we have Echo. Echo is an electric polearm that is alright at breaking enemy shields and providing a bit of supporting buffs, but in terms of PvE, when you're facing mass groups of enemies, I would say she's a little underwhelming. I'd put her at around D tier. And then next up, NA. SR, I know, but she is extremely good at creating weapon charge. Wow. Even though her stat for weapon charge isn't that great, because of the fact that her active ability is able to last for so long and she's able to spam her dash attack, not only is she great at shattering enemy shields, but if you're hitting multiple enemies at once, she creates pretty good weapon charge. So I'm putting her actually all the way up at A tier. Next up, Hilda. I mean, if you saw my other video, you're going to know my thoughts on Hilda. She is not that great. To be completely honest, that she has her own section. Because her damage is mediocre. And if you're propped up on a turret, you are not moving. In this game, you definitely need to be mobile against enemies. If you are stationary setup, you're not going to be able to dodge their attacks. You're going to be taking more damage, and you're not going to be doing the damage that you need to. So yeah, no, Hilda, she gets her own tier. Huma for PvE is interesting. She's all right for PvE. She does provide the defense resonance if you need a character so you can have defense tank resonance. But her damage isn't all that great for clearing masses of enemies. Yeah, she's mainly a PvP monster. So I'm putting her in B tier. Now King. King is the king of breaking shields. He is extremely good in PvE because he is able to hit multiple enemies and shatter all their shields. But the thing is, he is easy to interrupt. So do note that whenever you are using him, that you can put out his full combo without being interrupted by the enemy. I'm putting him all the way up in S tier. Now, since we don't have her released or mark released, we go on to Meryl. Meryl for PvE purposes. Now, I would put her in S, but in group play, Meryl is quite disruptive because of her discharge skill. If her discharge skill is used at the wrong time, you can really mess up all your allies and not really have a great time. So she's going down in the A tier. Nemesis. Nemesis is a great supporting character. Not only does she increase your electric damage, but she also heals. She's able to do pretty decent damage. And just an all-rounder great support character. So Nemesis, S+ tier. Future of the game, Nemesis definitely seen a lot more. We weren't expecting to get her so soon in global, but because we got her now, she's definitely going to be one of those up there. Now, she doesn't need copies to really help your team, but she's nice with a few copies. Now, Pepper. Pepper, like Coco Ritter in PvE, she's a healer. No DPS, dead DPS, bad DPS, so you definitely want to keep them alive. Pepper, I'm going to put her in C because she does provide the 60% damage reduction at 6 copies. So if you're able to get her 6 copies, your tanks, your DPS, whenever your active skill's up, they're not going to take as much damage. And that is extremely good for PvE. And next up for our global tier list is going to be Samir. Samir has a very safe AoE air attack, and she does electric damage. Now, the thing with Samir, she's one of the best characters to have just at 0 star. She doesn't really need copies to unlock her capabilities. So, well, as DPS goes, and because you don't really need copies for her, I'm going to put her at A. Because in the future of the game, Samir really does fall off. And moving on, we have Shiro. Shiro is a physical chakram character. Now, Shiro's interesting to use. She can dish out a lot of damage and provide pretty good supporting capabilities because of her physical damage stat, which makes enemies vulnerable to more damage. But her active ability, if the enemies walk away, like, there goes the majority of her damage. So with that said, I'm going to be putting her in B tier because it's really hard to find a good spot to really use her in PvE. The enemies are constantly moving around and bosses can't be stunned. And moving on, we have Tsubasa. Tsubasa is one of the best supporting DPS characters, as not only does she increase your damage, but her dash attacks do pretty good damage themselves. And she's cryo, so you want to free some enemies, this is your character. Now, because she does become a little bit weaker towards the future of the game, I'm going to be putting her around A and S tier. She really fits around that area. Now Zero. Zero is going to be the final character on this list, and he is a supporting character that can provide immunity to all damage for a short period of time. Now, Zero is in PvP probably one of the best supports because he can provide that immunity. So if a boss is about to annihilate one of your allies, you pop Zero's skill, they're full health. They took no damage from that. You can continue fighting the boss. Not only does that, but he provides heals and more damage with more copies of Zero. So I think in PvE, Zero is actually up in S tier. And with that said, that wraps up our global PvE tier list. I'll be making a PvP tier list later on, so if you want to check that out, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. We'll see you in the next video. Chief, out.